Hi, welcome to Flavor of Riverside. My name's Chef Robert Sevely. Backed by popular demand, we're going to be making soups for you guys again. All right, welcome back. Time for butternut squash soup. This is one of my favorite soups. I really like this. It's kind of common. The ingredients that we're going to have for it are going to obviously be the butternut squash. So here's half of a butternut squash. And what I do to prepare this is I'll cut the tops off and then I cut it down the center lengthwise. You want to be really, really careful about this because it's kind of stiff to go through. It's round, so it can move all over. It can slip out of your hands, so be careful. Then you want to scoop the seeds out. And then after that, you just put it on a sheet pan with parchment paper and into like a 350-degree oven till basically it starts to look like this. It takes start with right about an hour, so it does take a while, but it'll eventually look all wrinkly and it'll start to roast. You might even get some kind of bubbled up, almost black or brown sugar that's coming from the butternut squash itself. You don't need to oil them or do anything like that. But on the bottom side, they actually start to caramelize and they end up looking kind of ugly. And this one's cooled off, but they're delicious. They smell delicious. So at that point, once they cool down, we want to go ahead and we want to scrape it out of there. And so you can see it's just as soft as can be. You don't want any skin. And so just scoop that all out of there. And you'll have it ready to go. You just discard the skin, which I'll throw it in the trash can right back behind me. All right, so that's ready to go. Now the next stuff that we need is we're going to need shallots and garlic. We have salt and pepper, and I always start with a little bit of butter. So I have my Dutch oven starting to get hot. And as far as soups go, Dutch ovens are really the best way to go. These ones are made by Le Creuset, but there's Staub, and I think Martha Stewart has a brand out. It's a cast iron pot that has been enameled, so it's not going to rust. It doesn't need to be seasoned or anything like that. And they're just great for making soups and stews and stuff like that. They can go into the oven. They're called a Dutch oven because the way that they used to utilize these pots eons ago is they'd actually stick them into the fire themselves. And then they'd regulate it by piling the coals up around it. There are whole classes that you can do just on Dutch ovens. You can make biscuits in them and different desserts. You can do breads, let alone all the stews and the soups. If I'm going to do chicken and dumplings, this is the pot I'm grabbing. I've made giant pot pies inside of them. Sky's the limit. They're really something awesome to have. There's people that actually pass their Dutch ovens on from generation to generation. It's kind of a morbid way of thinking about it, but I've heard stories of entire houses burning down, and the only thing they find are their Dutch ovens. And they're able to polish them up, and they look great. So anyways, with that being said, we got this kind of getting warm. Hopefully it's not too hot. We're going to add some butter, like a couple of tablespoons. And we'll get a little more flame underneath this now. And the first thing now we start with are my shallots. Reason why I start with shallots and not garlic is the shallots are a little bit easier not to burn. Garlic burns very quickly. So we're just going to get this butter melted. I need something to stir with. Now, I've also made a couple of garnishes. A lot of people will garnish this soup with pumpkin seeds or something like that. But to me, the pumpkin seeds are really kind of woody, and it'll almost be like fingernails in your mouth, which I don't like that feel, or like sunflower seed pods or something like that. So I do croutons. The way I made these croutons is this is actually the Hawaiian sweetbread that I cubed up, and then I took some butter and I melted like 2 sticks of butter, and I got that really hot, and then I added the bread into the butter and I deep fried them in butter. It's amazing. It's not very healthy, but it's awesome to do once in a while. Just remember everything in moderation and you'll be fine. All right, my butter's starting to brown. Let's not get it too brown. We'll add the shallots. And every time we add an ingredient, we're gonna season it. So a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and it's all about continuing to layer those flavors over and over. And so that salt and that pepper brings out all the flavors of every ingredient that we're adding. So we're gonna cook those till they start to look translucent. Then we're gonna get in our garlic. Give that another second. All right, that's looking pretty good. We'll get our garlic in. That was right about like 3 cloves of garlic. That was 2 really big shallots, you know. And the shallots, they have the red skin. They're usually not with the onions in the grocery store. And shallots have kind of a flavor of like sweet onions and garlic mixed together. Really good. If there's like certain flavors that you're trying to shoot for, like restaurant flavors, start replacing shallots for onions, okay? Shallots are just absolutely delicious. All right, so that's going. Now, add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper to that garlic. Now, the other thing that I have is I have a little bit of curry powder. This is a Madras curry powder. You can make your own curry powder blends. It's a little bit spicy, but it adds something to the butternut squash that you just can't get otherwise. It's not something that you're gonna say to yourself, especially if you hate curry powder, it's not something you're gonna say to yourself, it has curry in it. It's not gonna taste like curry. I almost like season with it, like I do with salt and pepper. So I'm gonna add a little bit of that so it toasts. Add a little bit more, a couple of big pinches, and I can always add more. And the smell in here is just getting amazing now. And that will saute together. And then from here, I'm gonna add all of my butternut squash. That's all gonna go in. Make sure I don't have any skin. I'm gonna kind of look around as I move it around. Sometimes you'll end up with little pieces of skin because the skin gets really tender as well. Go ahead and season that, salt and pepper. And I'm just gonna kind of mix those shallots into that. Now, from there, I'm gonna add my cream. Now, you could use milk, you could use half and half, but hey, go big, use heavy whipping cream. Now, that was 1 quart of heavy whipping cream. All right, so we're starting to come up to a boil. Now, this is gonna be extra thick, so what I always do is, of course, I could add more cream, but why don't I just add some stock? So here's a little bit of chicken stock, and obviously this could be vegetable stock. I added about half of that. I'm gonna give it another stir. I'm gonna make sure that it's kind of liquidy. And then I'm gonna get in here with my immersion blender, okay? This is my immersion blender. There's lots of different companies that make these, okay? I prefer to have a metal stick on the blender itself. And that way, when I go into a hot pot of soup, I am not gonna melt the stick itself. So I can get down here on the bottom, and if you're not careful, you can squirt your whole audience out in front of you. Now, you could go into a regular blender if you don't have one of these. But if you plan on making lots of soups, this is really the way to go. Because I don't have to transfer the hot liquid into a blender cup. And then when you do that, you have to like click, 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 and then turn it on. And it can end up spraying all over the place. This way I can just get in here and I can puree while it's still cooking. Now, I can still tell it's a little thick. And if the camera's getting down in there, you can see how thick it is. It's kind of the thickness of like runny mashed potatoes right now. Well, remember, we're making a soup. So I can add the stock as I go. So I get that perfect consistency. And I just let that keep pureeing so it gets nice and smooth. A little bit more stock. And there's just a little bit left in there. Maybe like a quarter cup left in the box. Remember, these are about a quart, so 4 of these in a gallon. All right. So, take this out. Nice one about this particular one, this is a Viking brand, is this will detach. I can wash this separate from my motor. So I'll just gonna set this aside. And I'll come back over here with my spoon. You can see it's nice and pureed. And it's still coming up to a boil. So that's beautiful. Now, one of the other things that I'll generally add is some honey. And so I sort of need to taste this. I need to look at it. I'll come in here and I'll give it a nice taste. And now I'm tasting for salt, pepper. I'm tasting to see how sweet it is, if I need some honey, or if I need some more curry powder as well. Oh, that's really good. I'm going to add a little bit of honey. I forgot to take the top off. That's okay. Touch of honey. Touch more curry powder. A little bit more salt. A little bit more pepper. Now I could use the immersion blender and I could blend this all in, or I could just stir it in. We'll just get that together. It's come up to a full boil. And so let's go ahead and plate one. I'm going to shut it off. Now, if I had the time and I wasn't on camera, I'd probably let this cook for about another like 10 minutes. And then I'd shut it off and really let those flavors meld together. But it is delicious. It's ready to go. Let me go ahead and get the ladle, and we'll take a soup cup or soup bowl, get it in here, and we'll give ourselves a nice big ladle full of this. Then what I like to do is I'll take a little dollop of sour cream or creme fraiche right in the center, and then a few of the buttery croutons that I made earlier. If you wanted to, a little bit of parsley or something like that. There's your butternut squash soup. Delicious, ready to go. Very excited. All right, we'll be right back. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make the vegetable chowder. It's gonna be delicious. It's gonna be packed full of vegetables and vitamins. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. All right, welcome back. Now we're gonna do our vegan vegetable chowder. I call this a chowder because in order to be a chowder, it has to be a complete meal. So it has to have a vegetable, a starch, and a protein. And so lots of different soups can be that. A chicken noodle soup can be considered a chowder. Most people think of New England clam chowder. It doesn't have to have cream in it in order to be a chowder. So this works because we got vegetables, we have tofu for our protein, and we have this red quinoa for our starch. And so we have our vegetable stock going. We're using that Kitchen Basics vegetable stock. It's really nice and dark. We're doing this one in a stainless steel pan this time, just to show some diversity, to show you guys you don't have to have a Dutch oven in order to make soup. But so I do a lot of my soups this way, like a lot of my quick soups. I'll get my stock going, and this could be rice, it could be barley. Today we're using quinoa. We're gonna add that in, right about a cup of it or so. And that's gonna suck up double its amount. So it's gonna suck up 2 cups of stock. This is right at 3 quarts of stock, so almost a gallon. And then everything else, how I do these quick soups is I saute everything else in a pan. We could do it all in the pot, but then now you risk overcooking the vegetables because you're cooking the quinoa in the stock itself. So I always saute the vegetables. I want to layer them with the flavors, get the salt and the pepper in there, and it just ends up tasting really good. I can make lots of Asian soups this way. I make my chicken noodle soup this way. So lots of like the clear broth soups, they can be done in this direction. So I have my pan, it's getting hot. My oil probably will start smoking right away, which is fine. Already came to the smoke point. We don't want it to catch fire, but let's go ahead and get our onions in. And I wanted it that hot because I want to get some caramelization on my onions. A little bit like I did the French onion soup, but not near as caramel, okay? I'm gonna obviously add some salt and some pepper right away, okay? Make sure those are all sitting down on there. Then, the other ingredients that I have is I have carrots, I have celery, and the onions make a mirepoix. It's a really great base for the soup itself. Then I had red bell peppers, and this kind of has a little bit of like a Spanish flair to it because we're using poblanos. Poblanos, pasillas, however you want to say it. I was basically told that pasillas are dried, poblanos are fresh, but most of the time they're calling them pasillas nowadays in your grocery store. So if you're in a Ralph's or something like that, if you go to one of the Mexican markets, you can say either one and they'll point you in the right direction. So, like I said, we're gonna get these just a little bit caramelized. And they are caramelizing fast because my pan was really hot. I'm gonna get a little bit more extra virgin olive oil on my onions. And like I said, this is a vegan soup. So you don't have to be vegetarian to eat vegan once in a while. This is also really, really good for you. You know, cold and flu season's going around. So this is a good one. I actually made this for my wife. Shortly after our wedding, we kind of both came down with a cold. And so we had this soup like 3 days in a row. It was delicious. And that's why I'm making it for you today. My wife was really excited about having this soup. So, you can see they're just getting a nice little bit of color. Now, once they have a little bit of color, we can go ahead and add carrots and celery into the pan. Of course, we want to season them with salt and pepper. And we basically just want to get what we call sweating. We want to get the carrots and the celery to start to sweat, to start to leach out their own juices, their own water. So we just get those stirred in here. Want to make sure you're on a really high flame because you got a lot in the pan. And just let those go for a minute. Now, the next element that I have in the soup that will go in very, very last is kale. Kale is one of those ingredients that, like, it's kind of a health nut phase or fad. It's something that everybody's sort of leaning towards that's like wanting to get healthier, wanting to get in shape. It's really a great green. It can be used a lot like mustard greens or spinach or collard greens or something like that. So you can substitute all those if you can't find kale. Kale is delicious. The other thing you could substitute is maybe like bok choy or something like that. But it's just a really good hearty green. It holds up well in the soup. It goes in at the very end. We also have the tofu. I use extra firm tofu. And it's just raw. I just diced it up really nicely. And so it's ready to go. These are starting to kind of sweat out themselves pretty good here. And they're all nice and glazed and stuff like that. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add these to the pot. Get everything out of there. And then back onto the heat. Start letting it get hot again. And add a little bit of olive oil. And then we're going to do our peppers. So that starts getting hot again. That starts sizzling. In with the poblanos. In with the red bell peppers. And we'll saute these a little bit. A little salt and pepper. Give those a nice toss. And we're going to let those saute for a minute. Now we can start to finish our soup. I can go ahead and let's go ahead and add the kale. So in goes the kale into the soup. It's going to wilt down. That's looking gorgeous already. That quinoa is just about cooked. And then we'll go ahead and we'll add our tofu. Now remember, you don't have to make this vegan. Instead of the vegetable stock, we can use chicken stock. Instead of the tofu, we can use chicken. You can make this into a beef soup. If you don't like the peppers, we could do something else. We could go all Asian. We could go soy sauce or something like that in there. Or if you're not a fan of the poblanos, you could go with like red bell peppers and yellow bell peppers or green bell peppers, whatever you want to do. These are looking pretty good. They're starting to sweat out themselves really well. You can see when I talk about sweating that there's actually water on the bottom of the pan. There is zero water in that pan. It was really hot when we started going with this. So they're sauteing nicely. Go ahead, add those in. Going to get that fire turned off. Get this pan out of here. And we're going to get ready to plate. So, really like these bowls. We're going to go into a nice white bowl. Obviously, you know, if you wanted to add some croutons or something like that, you could go like that into there. A nice grilled cheese sandwich, or if you didn't want to do the quinoa, you could go with noodles or something. So, just a delicious soup. We'll let this come to a boil and we'll be right back, and we'll go ahead and plate it up and we'll taste it. All right, let's plate our vegan vegetable chowder. So, nice white bowl. Second, that's super hot. Let me switch it. Now let's plate our vegan chowder. Vegan, vegetable, tofu, kale, quinoa, all kinds of great stuff. It's at a nice boil. You can just see the gorgeous vegetables and the red quinoa all in there. It's just absolutely beautiful. Get some nice broth. Make sure you get a little bit of everything. Gorgeous. We'll shut that off. So our last soup today is the vegan vegetable soup with kale and quinoa and tofu. Just a great combination. Tastes just like I remember it. Then we have the butternut squash soup with the curry powder and the buttery croutons and the sour cream, just delicious and hearty. Thanks for joining us today on Flavor of Riverside. My name's Chef Robert Sevely. Keep cooking.